In these exclusive interviews, we'll hear from two men.
Ready for another deep dive? This time, we're taking on a story that's both baffling and heartbreaking. The Madeleine McCann case. It's a mystery that's gripped the world for, almost 2 decades now.
It really is one of those cases that makes you question, like, how much do we really know? And the length people will go to, the agonizing search for truth when a child vanishes.
Absolutely. We've pored over articles, reports, you name it. We love to get into the weeds. But this one feels different. We're dealing with a family vacation gone terribly wrong, and the ripple effects, those are huge.
And you're right, it's those ripples, those unintended consequences that make the McCann case so fascinating. Like, how did the investigation unfold? What role did the media play? And the public, their need to find answers, it's insatiable.
Yeah, it's almost like a collective obsession. So let's rewind, right? 2007, Algarve region of Portugal, sunny beaches, beautiful resorts, the perfect getaway. The McCann family, Kate, Jerry, and their 3 kids, including 3-year-old Madeleine, they're on vacation. Everything seems, idyllic.
And what a lot of people don't realize is they weren't alone. It wasn't like they were secluded, holed up in some cabin in the woods. The McCanns were with friends, a whole group of them, staying at a resort in Praia da Luz. And that group dynamic, it becomes a huge part of the story.
Right, so it wasn't just a family on their own. And that makes what happened next even more unsettling. May 3rd, the adults decide to have dinner, right? And they chose a tapas restaurant. But get this, it was still within the resort complex.
And here's where things get interesting. The restaurant wasn't that far from their apartment, like about 55 meters maybe? They could even see the building from where they were sitting. This becomes a major point of contention later. The fact that they left the kids sleeping while they went to dinner, even though they could see the apartment.
Oh, I can already hear the peanut gallery chiming in with their 2 cents. But hold on, they were checking on the kids, right?
Yeah.
Like every half hour, one of them would go back to the apartment while the others stayed at dinner.
And that tells you a lot about how safe they felt, They were in a resort with friends, it seems secure. But it's also a grim reminder that things can change in an instant. That perception of safety can vanish just like that.
And vanish it did. Because during one of those checks, it was around 10 p.m., Kate McCann finds something terrifying. Madeleine is gone. Like, poof, vanished. Apartment door was unlocked. Their world just imploded.
Imagine that panic, that frantic search, hoping against hope that there's a simple explanation of misunderstanding. But as minutes turn into hours, that hope starts to dwindle,
And the sources we've gone through, they paint a pretty chaotic picture of those early hours, that initial investigation. One local resident, Robert Murat, he became a suspect almost immediately. It makes you realize how quickly suspicion can shift in these high-profile cases, often with very little to go on.
Oh, absolutely. Murat's case is like a textbook example of how circumstantial evidence and shaky witness statements can turn someone into public enemy number 1, and fast. You also have to remember the pressure cooker these investigators were in. I mean, this wasn't just a local news story.
No, not at all. We're talking about a worldwide media frenzy practically overnight. Everyone and their brother wanted answers. And the pressure on those investigators, because remember, both Portuguese and British authorities were involved, it must have been immense.
Absolutely. It was like having a spotlight on their every move, which can be both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, you have more resources, more attention than you could imagine. But on the other hand, there's that risk of tunnel vision, feeling pressured to draw conclusions, maybe even prematurely, just to appease the public.
So they had the world watching, massive search efforts underway, and still, nothing. The trail runs cold, no sign of Madeleine. But then, in a truly shocking turn of events, the investigation shifts. And get this, the McCanns, they become suspects.
Yeah, talk about a dark turn. The narrative completely changes. It went from a family desperately searching for their daughter to them being at the center of it all.
Okay, hold on. What happened? Why would they suddenly be suspects?
Well, a big part of it was the sniffer dogs that the police brought in. These dogs, they were trained to detect traces of blood, cadavers, that kind of thing. And they allegedly had a strong reaction to the McCann's rental car.
Right.
And let me tell you, the whole use of those dogs, how their reactions were interpreted, it became extremely controversial.
Wait, so they found something in the car? Like, what did they find? It's like something out of a movie, These dogs, they picked up something in the car the McCanns were using. So what was it? What did they actually find?
Well, and this is where things get a little murky. It wasn't like they found, a smoking gun. They found traces, and I mean really tiny amounts, microscopic levels of what could have been blood. But the samples were so small that the technology back then, it couldn't say for sure whose blood it was, or even if it was definitely blood at all.
So we're talking about a possible trace, but nothing concrete. It seems like a stretch to go from that to suspecting the parents.
It's a huge stretch. And that's why this whole thing with the sniffer dogs remains so controversial. There were also, and this is where it gets even more complicated, alleged inconsistencies in the McCann statements about that night. Little details about when they checked on the children, slight variations in their stories. But I mean, under that kind of pressure, that kind of trauma, wouldn't you expect some inconsistencies?
Of course. They were living every parent's worst nightmare, and then to have the finger pointed at you on top of that, unthinkable.
And the media? They weren't exactly helping matters. It was a feeding frenzy. Headlines everywhere, Maddie this, Maddie that, speculation running wild, and the McCanns were caught right in the middle of it.
A harsh reminder that public opinion can be incredibly powerful and, unfortunately, not always fair.
Exactly. And in their case, the damage was done. Even though they were officially cleared as suspects the following year, 2008, that cloud of suspicion, it lingered.
So let me get this straight. We start with a missing child. Then the focus shifts to a local resident. Then the investigation turns to the parents. And all of this is happening under the microscope of the world's media, fueled by endless public speculation. It's no wonder getting to the truth has been so difficult.
Exactly. And because there was no clear evidence, theories started popping up left and right. One of the biggest ones, given the circumstances, was that Madeleine had been abducted.
Which is, sadly, not that hard to believe when you think about what was going on in the Algarve back then.
Right. I mean, there were reports of a disturbing number of registered sex offenders living in that area at the time.
It's a chilling thought, someone watching them waiting for an opportunity. It's terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying. It makes you think twice about safety, even in places designed for families. So did they ever look into that angle? Maybe someone familiar with the McCann's routine, someone who could have used that knowledge to their advantage. They did. The investigation went in a lot of different directions. They looked into other missing children cases, both in Portugal and internationally, trying to find any possible connections. It became this huge, sprawling investigation, with law enforcement agencies all across Europe sharing information, trying desperately to piece together what happened.
And for years, nothing. Dead ends, fading leads, and a family clinging to hope.
Then, 2020, bam, major development. German authorities announced they've identified a new suspect, a guy named Christian Bruckner. He's a German national, already in prison for other crimes.
Wait, hold on. This is more than a decade after Madeleine vanished. Why him? What made him a suspect after all that time?
Okay, so there are a few things. First, Bruckner was living in Praia da Luz when Madeleine disappeared. Second, and this is a big one, he had a history of sexual offenses, some against children. And if that wasn't enough, he was linked to a string of burglaries in the area where the McCanns were staying.
So not exactly someone who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is a guy with a serious past.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Investigators found phone records that put him near the McCann's apartment the night Madeleine disappeared. Like, he even received a phone call right before she vanished.
Oh, that sends chills down my spine. So after years of dead ends, did they finally have their guy? Was this the break in the case the McCanns so desperately needed?
It seemed like it, right? But, like so much of this case, it's not that simple. Even though he's still considered a person of interest, to this day, no charges have been filed directly linking him to Madeleine's disappearance.
Are you serious? After all this, they still haven't charged him.
You got it. I mean, they have evidence putting him in the area at the right time, and obviously his history raises massive red flags. But as far as we know, there's no concrete proof tying him to Madeleine.
This is unbelievable. What does this mean for the investigation now? And more importantly, how are the McCanns handling this new wave of uncertainty after all these years?
The investigation is still going on. They say they haven't given up, that they're still searching for those missing pieces. But it just shows how incredibly difficult it is to solve a case like this after so much time. Memories get fuzzy, witnesses become unreliable, and even if new evidence comes to light, can you trust it after all these years?
It's heartbreaking. We've gone from early suspects to the parents to this new lead who still hasn't been charged. So the question remains, what really happened to Madeleine McCann?
And that's the question that continues to haunt everyone who's followed this story. Was it a random abduction? A crime of opportunity by someone familiar with the area? or something else entirely, something we haven't even considered?
It's a chilling thought, but through it all, one thing remains constant: the McCanns' unwavering dedication to finding their daughter. So what have they said about this new suspect and the ongoing investigation? It's just, I don't know, incredible, I guess, to keep going, to keep searching for answers after all this time.
It really speaks to their strength.
Absolutely.
The McCanns, they've been through unimaginable heartache, but they've never given up. And when news about Bruckner came out, their response was, well, it was cautious.
Understandably so.
They've been disappointed so many times, But they released a statement and it said, all we've ever wanted is to find her, uncover the truth, and bring those responsible to justice. We will never give up hope of finding Madeleine alive, but whatever the outcome, we need to know, as we need to find peace.
It just gets you right here, that need to know, even if it's something you don't want to hear. It reminds you that this, as intriguing as it is for us, it's their life. It's real.
It is, and it forces us to think about some hard truths. The world can be a dangerous place, even when we think we're safe. We like to think these things happen to other people, but the McCann case, it shatters that.
It does. It makes you realize it can happen anywhere to anyone.
And it's a reminder, a powerful one, that even though we can't prevent every bad thing from happening, we can be vigilant. Teach our children about safety, be aware of our surroundings. It's a conversation we all need to be having.
Absolutely. We can't let fear control our lives, but we can be smart, be prepared. So here we are after all this, and we still don't have a definitive answer.
That's true. The McCann case, with all its twists and turns, it leaves us with more questions than answers. But it also leaves us with this profound sense of empathy for the McCann family.
It does.
And hopefully, it makes us a little more dedicated to keeping our own families safe.
I think that's a good place to leave it for today. This deep dive has been, well, a lot to process. But it's those tough cases, the ones that stick with you, that really make you think. They make you question everything you thought you knew. And maybe, just maybe, by wrestling with those tough questions, by really sitting with the uncomfortable parts, we become a little more aware, a little more prepared, a little more human even.
I like that.
And as for Madeleine and for her family, we can only hope that someday, somehow, they'll find some answers, some peace.
I hope so too.
This case, it's one that stays with you, that's for sure. It reminds us that some mysteries, they just don't